Hi VC, it's me again, come to entertain and show you things that probably you've seen dozens of times before. This one's a bit different. I wanted to record another books video, and it's already gone through about 4 different variations. I keep planning this, and it changes every so often. So what it's done now is it's morphed into a Beatles Books edition. It was going to be a bit more varied, but I don't know, I just but I realised I had more Beatles books or Beatles related books than I realised, so I thought, oh, let's just whack this out. Maybe it'll only last 5 minutes, but it's out there then. So the Beatles were probably, well, they were one of my first loves, to be honest. My mum was dead into them, so I remember vividly watching, I guess it might have been about 1976-ish, 76, 77 maybe, when they showed all the Beatles films on BBC Two. So I think it was on consecutive nights. So you had, so it showed Hard Day's Night, they showed Help, they showed Magical Mystery Tour, they showed Yellow Submarine, and they rounded it off with, what's it called, Let It Be? That's the net. Is it called Let It Be? The one where they were recording, the breakup, it was the one where basically everybody was hating each other. Although I wish I could see it again, because I've only seen it once, and that was the only time I ever saw it. And I obviously, very basic memories of what it was actually like. I was just in awe of seeing these people. I was in awe at that point when I was 6 or 7 of these people. Watching them just bugger about, basically, from what I can remember and I remember I remember being impressed by them playing on the roof. I remember that. Anyway, so, as a kid, and probably still now, I've always liked John most. I make no bones about it. I appreciate, the fact that I think Eleanor Rigby is the best Beatles song going. That's written by Paul, shows that I do really appreciate what Paul added, but for me, Lennon was always the one that piqued my interest. I'll start off with this one. I mean, I think this, I'm not sure, I can't remember exactly when, but I think this might have been the first one I got. So this is Ray Coleman's biography of John Lennon, and it shows up to be what a sarky, horrible little git that he was, which doesn't take a lot of doing, to be honest. But I still loved it. I mean, this runs all the way from meeting... I'll show you something in a minute. From meeting Paul, before that, his life, when Julia dumped him with Mimi and all the rest of it. I haven't read this for a very long time, so I don't know how it stands up now, but I loved it at the time. I remember devouring this, and I must have read it 2 or 3 times. I've just seen this. What a clever splitter I was, eh? School prize for biology. Anyway, next. So, it would have been this next. I think this was the next one I got. So, Philip Norman's Shout, which is probably an essential read for anybody who's into the Beatles or getting into the Beatles. Really, really good. Again, I'm not a Beatles maniac. I really love the Beatles, but I'm not an absolute maniac. It's not my be-all and end-all. But I would recommend that to anybody, really, who wants to find out more about them as a starting point. Great story. Right. Now, as I got more and more Beatles records, I was just infatuated with their lyrics, so I ended up getting this. which is the lyrics to every song of every, well, that they released. I'm just checking if, except for Revolution 9. But it's got everything else in here, even, you know, like the singles, the standalone releases, all the lyrics. I mean, there's no commentary or anything on the songs. It is just plainly a lyric book. But I just used to love putting the records on, or the tapes, or whatever version I had of them, and just reading along the lyrics. And I mean, this for no one. So that was great. I loved just flicking through this. She's a Woman, 8 days a week. I mean, love that. This is a more recent purchase, and I got this. I think James Griffiths probably was the main reason I got this one. This is an earlier version to the one he's got, but Revolution in the Head, which is a commentary by Ian MacDonald of every Beatles song, that was ever released. Not that I agree with everything he says. I think some of it is absolute crap, but give him his due. He's got his opinions. He sticks to them. I don't agree with them, but that's a sign of a good book for me. He puts his opinions out there, and it's up to you whether you agree or not, really. I think the one he gets most wrong is Helter Skelter, but it's a good read, and it's lovely to dip into this with whatever you're listening to at the moment, just to find out, because he includes a lot of studio details and all kinds of things in there. So whichever version you get, I think there's some extra sort of essays or scene setting in the later versions. But to be honest, the bits I'm interested in is the Beatles songs, which is the main part of the book. So I do recommend picking up any copy, any edition of that. Going along with that, this is another recent purchase I got. I found this in a charity shop for a couple of quid. This is a really good read. I loved this. This is Revolution, the making of the Beatles' White Album, by David Quantick, who I think used to write for the NME a long time ago. He ends up being a bit of a speaking head on British TV whenever the sort of pop music of a certain age is discussed. But he's actually a real sarky sod. And this actually made me laugh out loud more than once. There's some great little bits in here. I mean, some of the, for instance, you've got a picture, that's a fairly famous picture of the Beatles, and the caption to that reads, "The Beatles, practicing different facial expressions for their solo careers." Brilliant. Describe, I mean, the picture of Eric Clapton there just before he plays on guitar. So the caption is, Eric Clapton about to play on While My Guitar Gently Weeps, have an affair with George's wife, become a junkie, etc. Just about sums up his solo career for me, to be honest. But this is very opinionated, very it's amusing, it's interesting, it's pretty well written, and it's very personal as well. It's his feelings towards the White Album. As to what it really means. I really like this book. I'm going to reread this. I think really good book. I recommend this one. Right. Okay. I picked this up somewhere along the line as well. This is an alternative version of the Beatles story. I'm sure people who know the Beatles know these books. I'm sure they do. Although one I've got, maybe not. I'm not sure. I've got one that maybe not. Anyway, so this is Peter Brown, who was manager. No, he worked at NEMS with Epstein. He was John Lennon's best man at his marriage to Yoko. He worked at Apple. So it's kind of like more of an insider's version of the events. So this adds more detail and more context to the Beatles story, and I quite like that. Right, okay, 3 left. I'm going to start with the saddest one of the 3 because it was well, not written but recorded just before he died. So this is John Lennon and Yoko Ono, the Playboy interviews. I mean, this is a good read. I mean, it was such a hopeful interview. I mean, he was so positive in this, and yet I think this was summer of 1980, so just before Double Fantasy came out, and so sad. This interview came out the interview and the article came out in Playboy 2 days before the shooting. I think it was 2 days or something like that. 2 days before the shooting. And this is the entire unedited interviews. 20 hours of interviews apparently. So yeah, this is so sad but so interesting. Anyway, moving on. Right, and then we get to the upbeat part of John. I told you I was more into John. You can see there's no books about Paul here. Sorry for the bias. Right, so I'm going to go with this next. So here we've got a compilation of John's 2 books. So you've got In His Own Right and A Spaniard in the Works. And this is just, it's just stupid, some of it. It's him doing sort of goonish type humour, lots of free association stuff. I really like the art in here. The drawings are great. Really like the drawings. It's just all wordplay and playing about with language, and I just love it. I just think it's great. And I really love the artwork in it. It's so simple, but it's just great. There we go. Right. And this was a really nice, I mean, it's really funny in places, Anyway, so that's A Spaniard in the Works and In His Own Right. So there we go. And the final one, I bet I might be one of the only people on the VC who actually own a copy of this. Right. This takes a little bit of setting up. Right. So, in 1966, the film company was trying to sort out a follow-up to Help, which never actually happened, for various reasons. I think this would have been in 66. So, at the time, the hottest new young playwright was a guy called Joe Orton. He just had the Evening Standard Best Play Award for the West End with Entertaining Mr. Sloane. I adore Joe Orton's work. I think he was an absolute genius. And if you get interested in him, he's such a sad story, really. But he was asked to write this. Now, this is called Up Against It, and this was a script he produced for the Beatles' third film, and this is black farce of the highest standard. It is just absolutely supreme farce with such a dark edge to it. It is just amazing. This is actually a rewritten version. The first version had parts for all four Beatles, but he then rewrote it for three main young characters, and because he thought it worked better. So this is that version. But I can't imagine that the Beatles would ever have been in here, because, I mean, if you think that Lennon's solo writing was dark and twisted in some of it, and in his own right, this is just over there. It's got gender wars, it's got terrorism, cross-dressing, it's got sudden leaps of narrative style, it's got violence. I mean, I wish the Beatles had filmed this, because it would have been unbelievable. But I guess it wasn't going to be in the direction they wanted to go, seeing as the direction they took with Pepper just afterwards. I guess they were sort of heading towards it. Maybe they just didn't want to film something after they'd announced that they were giving up touring. But what a missed opportunity this would have been. This is just a funny. Well, it appeals to my sense of humour anyway. But I think this would have been fantastic. And I strongly recommend people to investigate Joe Orton, because he's a fascinating chap. His writing is brilliant. Absolutely loved it. He was a playwright, and probably the first great farce writer since Wilde, to be honest. Absolutely phenomenal writer. They made a film of his life called Prick Up Your Ears, which starred Gary Oldman as Joe Orton, and Alfred Molina as his boyfriend, Halliwell. It's just a fantastic stuff. Anyway, enough. So there you go. Joe Orton up against it. Beatles book, final one. There we go. Right. I hope all you Beatles maniacs can tolerate my little foray into there. As I said, I like the Beatles. I like them a lot, but I'm not a font of all knowledge. So it's a fairly amateurish appreciation of those books. But it's a nice selection, and if you picked up sort of those, especially if you were more interested in John rather than Paul, sorry about the bias again. There you go. Right, that's it. I'm off to read up against it again, because it's only about 60 pages long and it's really funny. Cheers, VC. I'll see you all later. Bye.